will come to order. Members, at February 15th, 2022. For the record, we do have a quorum. And we just have one bill before us, Senator Abeler, your Senate File 2876, the COVID waivers and modifications. Senator Abeler, welcome to the committee.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the committee's time. And this is actually a very important bill, and it's been a long 2 years, Madam Chair. I think that we've sat through the Senate's effort to weigh into the COVID situation, providing, I think more than $500 million in cash and much more activity beyond that to address the many challenges of COVID. We've, as a Senate and as a legislature, we've worked with the governor to deal with, at least when he would let us work with him, to work with some waivers to current laws to make the emergency matters go better. Some of those waivers still make sense, and the bulk of those are policy-based and not really perhaps the interest of this committee today. Some do involve money, and that's where I think the attention, we would prefer it to be. We can discuss anything in detail you want, but just in the interest of the focus, I thought I'd talk about that. And so this bill is meant to be a COVID bill. The Speaker is interested in it staying COVID, and I think we're a little more flexible on that, but understanding the dualism of two bodies and the interest of getting this bill accomplished early than late, because so many of these topics are so timely. This bill is going to be limited to COVID matters. In the amendment, I put on a couple items that were unfinished business, in my view, which the House is going to rather put into a different way. And so the beauty of this process is all the chairs weigh in, and if someone has a major objection, then it simply falls off for a later time. And that's a way to get an agreement early, and most of the matters that are in this bill still, I believe, are going to be agreed by both. It will be either confer read or pre-confer read, and then I'm not sure which way it's going to go. I think we're a little ahead of the House, but I'm not sure. But it's moving, and it will leave the House, the Senate perhaps as it is here, leaving the committee, or we'll have some small amendments on the floor to conform to the agreement that we come up with, or we'll concur with that with the House, or we'll have a conference committee. So anyway, it just depends how things go, but it's important that it's get done early, and I really appreciate the committee devoting the time today. There are the base bill is a good bill. There's a couple items that are going to have to be removed for the time being. The sub-minimum wage task force alterations, they need to be fixed. But it's just the House is unwilling to take that up, and I'm not willing to lose the whole bill over that. We'll take that up on a different bill. Adding some members to the committee would cost a little bit of money. We're to see how we can conjure up that money. This is not a money bill except for the two items that I'll mention to you. And then the other item had to do with the elderly waiver. Places that have more than 80%, that's a matter for another day as well. The House is unwilling to address that at this time. So the matters, back to the sub-minimum wage, also the focus, it's not the intention of the Senate at this point that there should be an elimination of sub-minimum wage. The task force is talking about it, but I can tell you if I'm still in any gavel range anywhere when the report comes out, it will not be eliminated anyway. So it's a discussion, and the reason that this is very important to many people watching today. The reason it came up is we were concerned that given how the feds just get wild hairs about stuff, if they said you can't have it anymore, we wanted to be prepared for the discussion. And so that's how I am taking the work of the task force. Anyway, so enough about that. And so the amendments that will be, there's two amendments. The A8 amendment comes out of the Health and Human Services Committee. It's a policy-only amendment, extends some waivers, and that's simply incorporating the work of that committee into this bill. It's policy only, and if you have questions about that, we can discuss it there. It was passed without any dissent. Senator Klein improved the emergency ambulance part of that. And then the topics that I think are most interesting to this committee would be the child care assistance, where we tightened it up. We're paying for absent days, and over the course of the time, there were 200 and some, I should have brought my notes, 200 and some examples where child daycares, where centers and homes were paid for absent days. Curiously enough, the majority of those, well over 100, were in licensed homes. Certainly the more beds, the more slots would have been in centers, but it was a pretty good program. And so to help out some of these centers to stay open in the challenges of COVID. And so it seemed a little lax to me how it was written, so we did not include it in the Human Services Committee, and I took it out to work on it. And so where we've tightened it up, that language is in the 810 amendment, and it requires that the income, the money that is received for these absent days be counted as income for the purposes of applying for the emergency 70 million grant that we passed last time. So we didn't want people to double dip, and maybe they weren't anyway, but we just wanted to clarify that you get paid once for your absent days, and that's in the amendment. The bigger topic to be addressed has to do with the emergency staffing pool and the source of the money. At one point, that was supposed to cost $4.1 million, and it's a very important matter for group homes in particular, homeless shelters, and one other venue, but it's available to many. And so what this amounts to be is actually where a vendor was selected during COVID times to go and get some extra staff, and if a particular site was in great risk of closing or not being operational, they could then draw out of this pool. The rates of pay were far in excess of the average rate of pay. Curiously enough, Madam Chair and members, when we adopted the House's amendment to require that there's a 30-day cooling off period between a person could be working at one group home to go to this emergency pool, the price of the project dropped from $4.1 million to $700,000, which means that there was poaching going on, which I find to be, frankly, intolerable. That we should set up a system where we're going to pay way more money than any group home, any assisted living, any nursing home, any of these facilities has, and give a vendor money to go undermine the operations of the very group they're trying to address. So I want to make it clear that it's my intention, and I presume the will of the Senate, that we make sure that 30-day cooling off period stay there. It has the benefit of reducing the cost. But I think it's a caveat, Madam Chair and members, that some of these efforts we did to do a good thing have actually caused a bad thing to happen and undermine the very good that we hope to have accomplished. So we don't always agree with the other body, Madam Chair, but in this case, they found a good idea, and we intend to stick with that. And so going forward, there's a couple items in our bill that the other body doesn't have, and a couple things they have that we don't have, and it's going to be an amiable discussion. There's what's not in this bill that I did not prepare an amendment for because we hadn't discussed it in our committee either, was a few tweaks to the SUD program about CMS approval, and they're technical and small, and we can sort that out, and it'll either come on the floor or come back as a concurrence. That's the only real open topics I can think of that are going to be discussed. We have the ambulance thing in ours that the House doesn't have, and maybe some MDH stuff. One matter that's going to be unresolved leaving this bill is going to be temporary nursing. And I think that's going to be discussed in a different way. And so we'll see how that sorts out. Senator Utke and that committee is going to be addressing that matter. So whatever that resolution is, could be carried here or could be carried elsewhere. So that's my comment to the bill, Madam Chair. And so however you want to mark up amendments, you may, please.
Thank you, Senator Abeler. A quick question before we bring up Mr. Albrecht to go through the fiscal note. Is the fiscal note line up with the House bill? Do you know? Are they running up?
That's a good question. It's based, I believe it probably does. Because they have the reason it shrunk was because of the 30-day cooling off period. So Mr. Albrecht can perhaps discuss that more than I can. But
Mr. Albrecht.
But I would make every effort to uphold what the Senate has come up with on this topic. And just other further discussion. There's going to be an amendment to move to cash on that section, which I'm fine with that. I think the discussion about that will remain open through the dialogue of this bill, and I think very much, Madam Chair, you'd want to be a part of that, along with your staff, to adjudicate what would be the best way.
Okay.
So I think it's nice to come out with a strong position from the Senate saying this is important. We're willing to put the cash into this. And I actually want to also just comment one other way. And today, later on, in the Human Services Committee, we're going to be taking up a bill that'll spend $321 million on rescue operations to stabilize nursing homes, assisted livings, group homes, where we're going to be able to put out some retention money to 206,000 employees who are sticking with it. And the content of that is going to be they have to, March 1st, there'll be a count made, and then August 31st, if they're still there, they get $1,000. I think that'll be helpful to stabilize. We're also going to be doing training and new hire grants of $1,500 per new employee. After 30 days, I think it's 30, not 31 days, they get half the money, $750, and then if they last the rest of the 6 months, they get $750. And then there's $1,500 for training, which could be used to cover, tuition and books and background checks and all of that. I was very happy to hear when we had the committee and the hearing about the governor's program, that their cost to do a CNA training was $1,300. So we're right on the mark. But the governor was shooting for 1,000, and actually 700 somewhere in the pipeline, and 14, I think, have made it all the way through. We're working to get 20,000, Madam Chair. And that's the kind of number we need. We actually need twice as many as that, but I think given the realities, 20,000 new workers in this industry at the base level with CNAs and different kinds of, dietary, et cetera, are going to make a huge difference. Mm-hmm. And finally, that bill is also going to include the PACE program, which is going to try to move into a futuristic way where it's more comprehensive funding, which actually saves money. And so this is the beginning of a bill. And so I think it's a really positive step, but this is all part of that. Mm-hmm. And so whatever we do today is going to be carried today in that bill as well, just so you know. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll stop talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Abeler. Looking forward to hearing that bill in this committee. Mr. Albrecht, thank you for being here, and Mr. Monahan is here also. Anything you'd like to mention in the fiscal note, which actually, I wonder if we should do the A10 first, and then we can talk about the fiscal note. Yeah. So, Senator Abeler, we have the A10 before us, and Senator Benson, would you like to move the A10 amendment?
Madam Chair, I'll move the
oral
A10.
amendment? Senator Benson moves the A10 amendment, and we do have an oral, Senator Abeler to the A10 amendment, and then we'll do the oral.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I kind of addressed it already. There's a number of technical changes in there. I will admit I don't understand Section 28, which talks about some contingent appropriations, and maybe that's part of what you're going to work on. That's a technical part, but the rest of the heart of it really is to remove two sections that I would rather not remove. And so I just want people to say, here again, removing them from this bill doesn't mean that they're not going to move, but this is not the vehicle. And so there's not room on this lifeboat bill for those, just given the controversy that they bring. But we're still going to push very hard for those very terms elsewhere. Otherwise, the child care assistance program, which I took out because I wanted to talk about it. And Madam Chair, just so you know, and for people watching that want to be a legislator someday, the way to get a discussion going is to take out something that the other side still has. Otherwise, to say let's work on it, then they really don't. So I want to thank the department for their help on cleaning this up to make it actually tighter. And I think the intention is totally there. So that's in there. And the rest of it is technical, or not technical, technical, I guess I'll say, and then related to the staffing pool money. So thank
Senator
you, Madam
Johnson.
Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I will admit I'm out of my depth clearly on these HHS type bills. But I am concerned a little bit with your discussion of the sub-minimum wage, taking that out. I get that you say that you're going to be pushing that forward, but nobody else has this currently in a proposal right now from the other bodies. So I'm just wondering, and for the sake of negotiation, why aren't we, leaving that in there? You must have some other reason for doing this, but I'm really concerned that we're taking this out of the bill. This is the first day I've seen this, but
Okay.
appreciate that.
Madam Chair.
Senator Abeler.
This is my effort to move a bill toward resolution. However, there's still time, and so if a person wanted to delete in the amendment, I don't know if it's line 1.2 or 1.3, I forget what section it is, I would not argue about that. I think it's section 2. So if a person wanted to not include line 1.3, you'll get no argument from me. So does that help?
Senator
Chair,
Johnson. Yes.
Senator Abeler, are you daring me to do that then? And I should go forward, or?
Madam Chair, Senator Johnson, I'm kind of hoping you will delete line 1.3. So
Of the A10 amendment.
Of the A10 amendment.
Yes. Senator Johnson, would you like to make that oral amendment?
So moved.
Okay, Senator
He doesn't,
Johnson.
I will.
Senator Johnson moves deletion of, on the A10 amendment, page 1, line 2.
Yeah, line 1.3.
Let me double check page 1.
Senator Benson, would you like to incorporate that into your oral amendment?
Madam Chair, I'm just verifying page 1, line 2 is the, okay, so Madam Chair, I think Senator Johnson's motion was 1.3. We'd be deleting section 2. I just want to clarify. Senator Johnson, could you restate your amendment before I incorporate?
Yes, Madam Chair and Senator Benson. So on the
Senator
A10
Benson,
amendment.
it's 1.2. Yeah.
Okay.
What's that?
Senator Johnson.
Okay. On the A10 amendment, so 1.3 refers to page 3, delete section 2, which is dealing with the sub-minimum wage section. So that will be my motion on the A10 amendment to remove 1.3. Correct?
Okay, Madam Chair, I will incorporate Senator Johnson's motion, or I will accept as an amendment the deletion of line 1.3.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
And
And then Senator Marty, to this oral
Madam Chair, just a
amendment.
question about the impact of that on the fiscal note.
We were just going to get that. Thank you, Senator Marty. Mr. Albrecht, is that going to affect the fiscal note? And welcome to the committee.
Madam Chair and Senator Marty, there would be additional costs attributable to Section 2 of the base bill that are not included in the fiscal note because it was, planned to be amended out. It would be relatively minor costs for paying the stipends to the additional members that are added to the task force. May or may not require an additional appropriation. That would be a decision that the author would have to make, whether or not to actually appropriate additional money for it.
Mr. Albrecht, what did you say at the end, very end? I couldn't hear that. And what was that
Sorry,
last?
Madam Chair. I said it may or may not require an additional appropriation. If the author chooses to provide an additional appropriation to the agency to pay those stipends, that's his decision. If he didn't do that, then it would, they would still have to pay those, but it would just come out of their administrative budget.
Okay, thank you. Senator Abel?
Well, thank you. And so it's whatever the cost of 4 members would be with their per diems and expenses, which probably in this committee's judgment is almost de minimis. So it's up to you how you want to handle it. I'm very comfortable asking the department to cover those costs, at least, especially for the interim time here. And this is going to go into a bigger discussion. And I think that the main, so that's, it's up to you, Madam Chair. You're the finance chair, how you think it should be handled. If you need a sentence to say that would come out of their operations somehow. There are some grants that are related to this program. You could direct that those monies are subtracted from some of the grants, and that could be even a floor amendment if you wanted to But it's small money. It's whatever 4 people cost to go to 5
Madam-
meetings in a year, probably.
Senator Benson?
And thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Abeler, there is a reference, and maybe Mr. Nauman can help, compensation as described under section 15.059 sub 3. That's page 4, line 31. I don't know what that line refers to, and is,
$50 a day.
we're kind of creating things on the fly here, but I'm trying to understand how the compensation's already managed.
So Senator Abler, this bill needs to be expedited, is that correct?
That's right, Madam Chair.
Right, and I feel like we should just stick with what we have as far as
Okay.
the fiscal note and roll with that, and conversation will continue, obviously, but
So-
there is an oral amendment.
So, Madam
Senator
Chair,
Abler?
I think the most, I think it's like $50 a day or something. So you have 4 people times $50, that's $200 a meeting. They go to 5 meetings at $1,000. If you give them some mileage, you're probably talking $2,000. So something in that range, it certainly isn't 10,000.
Yeah, okay.
So whatever you choose to do about that, and we can address it further, and if it needs a technical thing on the floor, I'm
That's
more
fine.
than happy to
Let's do
address
that, yeah,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
thank you. Senator Kiffmeyer?
Yeah, I just want to be sure, after all the discussion, what the motion is, and instead of doing the line numbers of the actual amendment, is a motion to delete Section 1 or Section 2 of the original bill in front of us?
Thank
Or
you, Senator
both?
Kiffmeyer. It is Section 2 of the original bill, so it'd be line 1.3 on the amendment.
So we'd be reinstating basically from, okay, so we'd be including, but not Section 1. Section 1 by this amendment then would still be
Correct.
deleted. And is that in accordance with the author's understanding of what would be the best way to go forward?
Senator Abler?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and just as, I appreciate the committee's work on Section 2 to strengthen my resolve on pushing again on this topic. We had a couple discussions about it with the other body, but we'll just push a little harder. So thank you for the team and improving my version of the bill. The first section has to do with the disproportionate share of folks in assisted livings, and the language that you have there costs $3 million and $13 million. So it's not quite ready to go yet. So
Right.
so we have to take that out, and it'll reappear later.
Right. Thank-
Senator Kiffmeyer?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I was listening to the fiscal conversation, and I suspected that was much more of a price tag than what we're doing with Section 2. So I'm comfortable then. I just wanted to be sure, because I do think it is a worthy situation on the dish adjustments, but I understand the situation. Thank you.
And
Thank
Madam
you,
Chair.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Oh.
Yes, Senator Abler?
Well, and I just, given how negotiations go, I would really like to get both these projects taken care of. Given the small nature of the sub-minimum wage part and the massive part about the other, there's a much better chance to slip that along with the rest and say, well, let's just sort this out. And so I think you're going in a good direction.
Okay, thank you. And then Senator Benson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to the A10 amendment, I do have another oral amendment. So I would like to, per Senator Johnson's motion, delete line 1.3. And then on page 2, starting on line 20, delete section 5.
Okay. Mr. Bodden, would you like to reinstate that, just for clarification?
Madam Chair and members, so these are changes that Senator Benson can incorporate in her A10 amendment, and as I understood them, she is incorporating a deletion of line 1.3 of the amendment, which will have the effect of removing Section 10 or Section 2 in the bill, and then the other change she wishes to incorporate is on pages 2 and 3, delete lines 2.20 to 3.1, which will have the effect of removing this new section in the amendment.
Okay.
Madam
Yes,
Chair,
Senator Benson.
that second motion, there was an instruction to MMB to find funds to cancel.
Right.
And so that's a fiscal decision, Madam Chair, but I think if we want this to move quickly, deleting that section is appropriate.
Mr. Nauman, to that, section 5, please.
Madam Chair and members, the decision that's being made with removing Section 5 makes this just a $1 million gross appropriation, and then there's FFP, so it'll be left with about the $700,000 net effect. There was concern expressed by MMB that we would be double counting with some of the actions that were taken in Chapter 12 of last year's budget agreement, so this eliminates that possibility.
It was a noble idea, Senator Abeler, but there is no more ability to do that.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Senator Benson,
to the A10,
as amended?
as amended, and Madam Chair, I'm waiting for our author to give me some signal if the A10 as amended is okay.
Senator Abeler.
Well, thanks. Madam Chair, one of the best things about going here is you always have the unexpected. So this bill might be taking a road trip to state government now with the other amendment. I'm sorry, could you just please ask your question again?
Senator Benson, basically she's asking how are you with the oral
Madam
amendment?
Chair, to the A10 as amended, Senator Abeler?
Well, taking out Section 5 is fine with me. Just, Madam Chair, did you already also adjust the appropriation on 3.3?
No.
Well, that's the right appropriation. Oh, okay. All right, so that's the right number.
Mr. Nauman, to that question, or Mr. Albert, you can do it.
Madam Chair, I'll just jump in. This is the gross appropriation. We appropriate the $1 million. There will be roughly $300,000 as per the fiscal note coming back in bookable FFP. So the net effect on our spreadsheets will be about $700,000.
But so you write down the million. Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Oh, that's fine with me, Madam Chair. The amendment is Senator Benson. It's
Okay. Senator Marty.
a nice amendment. Thank you.
Madam Chair, just a quick comment that putting back the sub-minimum wage task force, I don't see the relationship to COVID, which is what the bill is. I'm not sure that speeds up the process of the bill, but just a comment about that.
Thank you,
Since
Senator
that's been
Marty.
incorporated.
Okay. On the motion before us,
Madam Chair,
Senator
the
Kierkegaard.
motion is to do this amendment, correct?
Yes,
Okay. all right.
as amended.
As amended, all right.
Okay. Video's on, audio's on. All those in favor of the amended A10 amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails, amendment is adopted. Okay, and then Senator, we have one more amendment, Senator Benson.
Madam Chair, I have the A8 amendment.
Senator Benson moves the A8 amendment. Senator Benson to the amendment.
Madam Chair, this was heard in the Health and Human Services Committee. The foundation is a Senator Lang bill. The EMSRB needs some temporary authority to continue as they had during COVID. They are facing, again, critical staffing shortages, and flexibility in operation stays in place until June 30th of 2023, with appropriate notice to the chairs and ranking members of legislative committees who have oversight on the EMSRB. And then continuing, Commissioner of Health has some limited emergency authority that will expire June 30th of 2022 as it relates to hospitals' flexibility in their bed capacity, layaway and non-layaway beds, and doesn't apply to nursing home transfer discharge waivers unless the federal government approves it. But this is time limited and allowing them some of the flexibility they've had during COVID until things get resettled.
Very good. Thank you, Senator Benson. Any questions on the A8? Senator Abeler?
It's a great amendment, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Microphone's on, video's on. All those in favor of the A8 amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. Members, too, I just want to point out there is a letter from the Child Care Assistance, on this Child Care Assistance COVID absent day waivers before us, and there's quite a list of people that are in support. If you get a chance, please take a look at that. So there is an urgency to this bill. With that, any further questions, discussions? I'm sorry, Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I've reviewed the language on the task force. The policy issues are not the purview of the State Government Committee. It's the structure of the task force. And I see no issues with this structure. A lot of this is technical kinds of things and adjustments, so I would waive it going to State Government at this time.
Thank you, Senator Kiffmeyer. So it will be sent to general orders. Okay.
And Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator Abeler.
just a closing comment. I hope that when the public looks at how we're doing our work, and they only see the outside part, I hope that they see with the Senate and the House and the governor, there's a lot of times we actually can work together on stuff. The bantering makes the news. And frankly, a lot of us are not that happy with how everything's been run by the administration. They could have done better, in my opinion, in so many ways. But when push comes to shove, and things have to get done, and there's urgencies that are around, the legislature does respond. And I think this is an example of that. And I think the tone of this bill, the tone of the discussion, and the collaborative work that's going to be leaving, that's come into this point and leaving, will be how people want their government to run. And so I want to thank you for being part of that. And so this bill will continue on and hopefully get done soon. So thank you, Madam Chair, for the time and the good attention.
Yes, thank you, Senator Abeler.
Madam Chair.
Very well said. I do have a question
Me too.
for you, and it's, perhaps you don't know the answer, but why was this not picked up by the governor's pool of money that was designated for COVID-related expenses?
The staffing pool?
Yeah, no, the 500 million that we gave him for these COVID-related expenses.
Actually,
Do you happen to know? I mean,
no,
just out of curiosity.
a lot of these expired. We thought COVID would be done by December. We extended a whole bunch of waivers to December because it was on schedule to be done by then. And then this Omicron thing popped up and kind of made a mess out of everything. And then the emergency pool in particular, which has been the main topic today, expired at the end of December. Mm-hmm. So that's why we're here for another waiver extension. Hopefully, this is the last one, but we'll see.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. An area that I've worked on a lot is in-home family child care providers. And I'm noticing here modifications for child care center staff distribution. Does this have any impact on the in-home family child care? Do they have needs similar to this that could be useful to them that we might add on later?
Senator Abeler.
Madam Chair, that question never came up along the way. If there needs to be a technical adjustment to that to make sure it includes the family licensed homes. The situation in family homes, there's an operator and the ratio is allowed 1 to 10. If you have 2 people, it's 1 to 14. They're not really designated so much as specific roles. They're just people that are of age with a certain amount of responsibility. The centers have ratios. So I'm happy to, if there's the desire of this is to make it work. And I mentioned earlier that the absent day program actually took care of, by number, more homes than centers in terms of the quantity. So I believe for once, the department was even-handed about that. If those watching want to make some accommodation for, ratios or for the type of staffing, that would be germane to the floor.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Further comments? I don't see any. Senator Benson, would you like to make the motion?
Madam Chair, I'll move that Senate File 2876 as amended be recommended to pass and placed on general orders.
Senator Benson moves that Senate File 2876 as amended be recommended to pass and placed on general orders. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion prevails. They're sent to general orders.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members.
Thank you, Senator Abeler. Members, we have a welcome to Mr. Nauman, he's back. It's great to have the finance group back in person, and it's really good to see you. Thank you. Get the band back together, that's right. We do have a hearing this Thursday at 8:30, and we are going to have the MMB presentation that was scheduled last Thursday. It's going to be on the state debt with Commissioner Showalter, and on the federal funds issue that we're hearing a lot about, how much money has been sent to the states. So any questions on that? All right.
Madam Chair, there
Senator
are
Marty?
no bills you have on the agenda yet for the next few days.
No, sir. Nothing yet, Senator Marty. So
Thank you.
with that, we'll just see you Thursday. Finance Committee is adjourned.